folks, welcome to the channel. For now, the name of the channel is Thinking Theology, but I'm going to change it because people have gotten the idea, and I understand it, that I'm defending theology or establishing it or something, which I'm not. I'm agnostic. I'm right in the middle. It's just anything that sort of might tie into good or bad ideas that emanate from theology or work against it from the scientific realm in particular. So it's a heavy dose of science information, if you will, and reactions and scientific concepts that might make it inconvenient for a theologian. And so that's pretty simple. But I don't come against it because there are certain ideas in theology, too, that are extraordinarily deep that just make us think. And you don't have to think about it, obviously, but that's the impetus for the original name of the channel. But I'm going to change it, and I've got about 20 ideas right now. So right now, the name of it's Thinking Theology. So welcome to the channel, but that will change. I'm looking at right now today, Brian Cox, who's a theoretical physicist on the Joe Rogan show, and the title caught my attention. Where does God fit in an infinite universe? That's an audacious subject to tackle, so let's find out what's what. Here we go.
Well, I think the distribution of information has changed so radically over the last couple hundred years, and particularly over the last 20, that you're seeing these trends now where more people are inclined to abandon a lot of the, even if you remain religious or you keep a thought or a belief in a higher power, people are more inclined to entertain these concepts of science and to take in the understanding of what has been observed and documented and written about among scholars and academics. And there's more people accepting that. If you look at the number of agnostic people now as opposed to 20, 30 years ago, it's rising, it's changing. And I think there's also, because of you and because of Neil deGrasse Tyson and Sean Carroll and all these other people that are public intellectuals that are discussing this kind of stuff, people like myself have a far greater understanding of this than I think people did 30, 40 years ago. Yeah. And that trend is continuing, I think, in a very good direction.
Yeah. I mean, what we should say is that science, we don't know all the answers. So we don't know where the laws of nature came from. We don't know why the universe began in the way that it did, if indeed it had a beginning. So we don't know why the Big Bang was very, very highly ordered, which is ultimately, as Sean Carroll, actually, you mentioned him, often points out, and he's right, that the whole difference, the only difference between the past and the future, the so-called arrow of time, is that in the past, the universe was really ordered, and it's getting more disordered. And that's that necessary state of order at the start of the universe, which is really the reason that we exist. That's the reason, because the universe began in a particular form. We don't know why that was. So we will probably find out at some point, and it'll be something to do with the laws of nature.
I would like to know if any of you people know or have seen anything on this about the singularity, if everything emanated from a singularity of infinite density, however we conceptualize that. Presumably a place of infinite density would be uniform, meaning there would be no variations within that singularity. My question has always been, if, given that as a premise that we emanated from it, what was the catalyst for it to alter its state? Because the physics, as we understand them today, would be very different. The laws of physics did not exist within that singularity the way they do now, as I understand it, and that's what mathematicians and scientists and others have theorized. But what was the destabilizing? What could have possibly destabilized that singularity such that it would have altered and become the laws of physics the way we observe them and live within them today, within our limited lifespans?
But so I'm always careful. I don't want to. Science can sometimes sound arrogant, right? It can sometimes sound like it's the discipline of saying to people, well, you're not right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's not the discipline of saying you're not right. It's saying this is what we found out.
Yeah.
So I like to say that it provides a framework within which, if you want to philosophize or you want to do theology or you want to ask these deep questions about why we're here, you have to operate within that framework because it's just an observational framework.
Yes.
So everything we've said is stuff we've discovered. It's not stuff that someone made up, right? We understand nuclear physics. We can build nuclear reactors, for example. So we understand the physics of stars. So we understand that the stars built the carbon and oxygen, and we know how they did it. We can see it because, as I said before, we can. If you look far out into the universe, you're looking way back in time, and as you look back in time, you see less carbon and less oxygen. So we have a direct observation that in the earliest universe there wasn't any, because we can see it, and now we see that there is some, and we know how it was made. So I think it's important to be humble when you're talking about science. And you're not saying this is the way that it is.
Anything.
I mean, you are in a sense, but it's not able to answer ultimate questions at the moment. It's not able to answer even whether the universe had a beginning or not. We don't even know that.
Yeah.
And I gave a talk to I was asked to give a talk to some bishops in the UK about cosmology, and I said, yeah, that'll be great fun. And so I went and gave them this talk, and at the end I said, I've got some questions. So if the universe is eternal, and it might be, it might not have had a beginning. If it's eternal, what place is there for a creator? That's a good question.
Right.
They didn't have an answer, of course, right?
An eternal creator.
But I think that it might be eternal, and we might discover that. So we don't know at the moment, but we might. So I think my point is that
I'm not sure how
these other human desires, it's very natural to religion's a natural thing, right? People, you see it all across the world in all different cultures. But I think that in the 21st century, religion needs to operate within that framework. If it's going to operate, there are still great mysteries, and it is appropriate to think about what it means to be human. And I've given you my view of what it means, but I don't think the problem comes when your theology or your philosophy forces you to deny some facts, some measurement. These things are measurements. We're not saying, it's not my opinion the universe is 13.8 billion years old. We measured it. It's like having an opinion between the distance from LA to New York. You can't have an opinion on that.
Right.
We know what it is. And it's the same,
Right.
It's like, these things, the people say the earth's flat or whatever. So it isn't, and we've measured it. So it's just stop it. But that doesn't mean you can't be spiritual and you can't be religious. I would say it doesn't mean you can't believe in God or gods, or that's not ruled out.
Now, a couple thoughts. One is about the age of the universe. The thing that religionists will latch on to, and not wrongly so, people who believe that the universe had a beginning of however long ago it may have been. Some people say 6,000 years. Some people will grant the scientific variation of 13.8 billion, but that number has changed. The Earth is theorized to be 4.5 billion years old. And when things change, as new information comes in, and it can be a disingenuous approach, but not entirely so, they say, look, until you settle and come down on a number, we can't even discuss whether or not the universe had a beginning and how, not just how old it would be, but where would a creator fit within this. So in the meantime, I'll hold on to my belief that there's a God. As that's just one perspective that some folks might have. But the other one touches on something that Brian Cox said, and he's right about this, and I've listened to and read a lot of things on this, that worldwide, the vast majority of people believe in a higher power. And that doesn't mean that it's right. It just means that it is common to mankind to think that there's more than just what we're seeing, that there's some rationale that we have within us that suggests that matter in the universe came from somewhere, or whatever primitive man might have come up with according to evolutionary theory. But it raises the question of beginnings. Overwhelmingly going to be Muslim. If you're born in the United States, for example, or in Western cultures, Canada, even Germany and Europe and stuff, you're overwhelmingly going to be Christian, whether it's Protestant or Catholic. Tibet, you might be Hindu or Buddhist, what have you. And so now people will say, well, where you are born determines what religion you're likely to be. That doesn't sound like some objective truth, some objective truth is coming to bear on you. It just seems to be a random variation that this man impregnated this woman in this part of the world, and then the culture impacted your belief. And fair enough, that's a fair assessment generally of the way things go. But then this raises the question, though, the matter of beginnings. Just like, did the universe have a beginning? Well, where did religion have its beginning? So according to the culture determining your religion, well, there was a first person who came up with an idea. Let's discount the idea of Adam and Eve, but let's just say there was a first idea. Let's say evolution happened out of the primordial soup, or however it materialized. Natural selection did its thing. Over time, our brains grew. Skulls grew to accommodate it. We became extraordinarily creative beings. We come up with concepts like math and all this stuff. And we come up with an idea like God. Well, there would have been a first person. Now, why? That would be, I don't know if anybody's done work on this, but I'm sure somebody has in some way. Why? How? What was the impetus for that person coming up with the idea that there's something more to this? Because the culture didn't exist. There was a time when a religious culture didn't exist according to evolution. You could philosophize that. You could obviously think about that, and theorize, but what are the ramifications or the implications of that direction of things happening? Why? If we were just people living, no culture existed, what was the point? Like, how did it happen that there was no culture giving rise to religion? Now it seems to have flip-flopped. And we say, see, that's one reason why there's no God. Another reason why I don't believe in a God, this is the atheistic perspective, is that it just seems to be random. That where you're born seems to suggest what your religion will be. And that's the influence, because people around you and your parents and grandparents all expect you to get baptized, and then you're exposed to it. And then you've got, in a sense, survivor bias, because the ideas are surviving in your head, and which is different than survivor bias, but it's part of it, an ideological survivor bias. So how do we explain the first person then coming up with that? It's just fun to think about. All right, guys. Leave your comments if you've got something you'd like me to cover. I tend to cover more scientifically oriented things, but if they touch on theological things, I like going to those places, not as a matter of defending it, as a matter of contemplating it, plain and simple. All right, have a great day. See you on another video. Keep thinking theology or whatever I change the channel name to. Have a great day.